The shocking truth about the first bulletproof vest test. Imagine this. It's the early 1900s. The Wild West is transitioning into a new era, and gunfights are not just the stuff of legend. They're part of life. Protection against bullets was a matter of life and death. But how far would someone go to prove they could stop a bullet? What you're about to hear is a true story, one of bravery, innovation, and a shocking twist that will leave you stunned. It's the early 1900s, and America is a land of opportunity, but also danger. Guns are everywhere. Shootouts, robberies, and lawlessness plague the streets. There's no protection against the bullets that cut lives short in an instant. If someone pointed a gun at you, your fate was sealed. But what if it didn't have to be? In the midst of this chaos, a man named Casimir Zeglin dared to imagine the impossible. A Polish immigrant and a humble tailor, Zeglin wasn't a scientist or a soldier. He was a man with a dream that one day, bullets could be stopped before they tore through flesh and bone. His inspiration came from an unlikely source: silk. To most people, silk was a symbol of wealth, something delicate and beautiful. But Zeglin saw it differently. He noticed that silk, when layered and tightly woven, had an incredible ability to absorb force. Could it stop a bullet? He had to find out. For months, Zeglin worked tirelessly, experimenting with different weaves and techniques, creating a vest that he believed could save lives. It wasn't made of steel or iron like a knight's armor. It was made of something far lighter, something revolutionary. He poured everything he had into perfecting this creation. But there was just one problem. How do you convince the world that a thin vest of silk can stop a bullet? The answer was simple and terrifying. Someone had to put it to the ultimate test. This wasn't just about science or invention anymore. It was about courage. To prove the vest worked, Zeglin needed a volunteer, a real person, to wear it while a loaded gun was fired at their chest. Think about that for a moment. The slightest flaw in the design, a single miscalculation, could mean death. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Yet, incredibly, someone stepped forward. A volunteer standing in front of a crowd, wearing Zeglin's creation. Was it bravery, desperation, or just blind faith in the tailor's vision? Imagine the scene. The crowd holds its breath as the volunteer takes their place. The shooter raises the gun, its barrel gleaming under the sunlight. Every eye is locked on the vest, every heartbeat synchronized with the tension in the air. The shooter steadies his aim, and then the gun fires. What happened next would shock everyone and change the course of history forever. The moment the gunshot rang out, the world seemed to freeze. Smoke curled from the barrel of the gun, the crackling sound still echoing in the air. All eyes locked onto the volunteer standing at the center of the stage. He hadn't flinched, but that didn't mean he was unharmed. The crowd held its collective breath, waiting to see if the silk vest had done what no one thought possible. The volunteer reached up and touched his chest where the bullet had struck. Slowly, he unbuttoned the vest. Gasps rippled through the onlookers as he revealed the silk armor, intact except for a small, charred indentation where the bullet had stopped. Beneath it, his shirt was untouched. The man smiled, raising his arms in triumph, and the crowd erupted into cheers. For Casimir Zeglin, it was the validation of a lifetime. His invention had worked, against all odds. Word spread quickly about the bulletproof silk vest. Newspapers picked up the story, heralding it as a miraculous breakthrough. But while the public was dazzled by the spectacle, others in the crowd that day were more skeptical. Was this demonstration a fluke? Could the vest really be trusted to save lives in real-world conditions? The skeptics weren't wrong to ask these questions. Zeglin knew the demonstration was just the beginning. The silk vest had proven it could stop a bullet under controlled circumstances, but it had yet to face the chaos and unpredictability of real life. And there was another problem: the cost. Silk was incredibly expensive, and producing a single vest required an immense amount of the material. This wasn't something that could easily be mass-produced or made available to the average person. Despite the obstacles, Zeglin wasn't deterred. He partnered with Jan Szczepanik, another brilliant inventor, to refine and improve the design. Together they worked to make the vest lighter, more flexible, and even more durable. But as they moved forward, the risks became greater. The next demonstration was more ambitious and far more dangerous. This time, Zeglin himself decided to step into the line of fire. He believed so strongly in his invention that he was willing to risk his own life to prove its reliability. Standing in front of a larger, more skeptical crowd, Zeglin donned the improved vest. The tension was unbearable. The shooter raised his gun, aimed carefully, and fired. Once again, the vest held. Zeglin staggered slightly but remained unharmed. The crowd erupted into applause, but Zeglin could feel the impact deep in his chest. Even with the vest, the force of the bullet was brutal. But not every test went as smoothly. In one chilling demonstration, a vest failed under the strain of a higher caliber bullet. The volunteer was injured, though not fatally, and the incident cast doubt on the vest's capabilities. It became clear that while the silk armor could stop some bullets, it wasn't foolproof. The inventors needed more time, more resources, and more innovations to perfect the design, and time wasn't on their side. Word of the invention reached powerful figures around the world, including kings and political leaders. One of the most famous moments in the vest's history came when it was credited with saving the life of King Alfonso III of Spain during an assassination attempt. But even as it gained recognition, Zeglin and Szczepanik knew their invention was still far from reaching its full potential. The silk vest had proven one thing: stopping bullets was possible. But it also raised a question that haunted Zeglin and his team. How many lives would be lost before they could perfect the armor? As the bulletproof vest gained recognition, its creators, Kazimierz Zeglin and Jan Szczepanik, faced increasing pressure to prove its effectiveness on a grander scale. Skeptics questioned whether the vest could withstand the larger calibers and varying conditions it might face in the real world. These weren't idle doubts. Lives would be at stake. The stakes couldn't have been higher, and the inventors knew they had to step up. Their next demonstration was planned for an even larger audience, and this time, the press was invited. Among them were prominent reporters eager to see if the invention lived up to its growing reputation, or if it would fail spectacularly in front of the world. For Zeglin, this was more than just a test of his vest. It was a test of his vision, his courage, and his legacy. The volunteer for this high-profile demonstration was a man named Charles Wells, a steel-nerved individual who had worked with Zeglin before. Charles believed in the silk vest's potential, but even he couldn't ignore the growing pressure of what was about to happen. The crowd, far larger than before, was buzzing with anticipation. Would the vest hold, or would this bold experiment end in tragedy? As the shooter stepped forward, armed with a larger caliber revolver than used in previous tests, the tension in the air was almost suffocating. Charles stood tall, wearing the silk vest tightly secured to his chest. His expression was calm, but his hands trembled ever so slightly as the shooter took aim. The shot rang out, louder and sharper than before. Charles staggered backward and the crowd collectively gasped. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, it wasn't clear what had happened. Then, Charles raised his arms and pulled open the vest to reveal a deep indentation in the silk where the bullet had stopped. Beneath it, his body was unscathed. The crowd erupted in cheers, and reporters scrambled to capture the moment. Headlines the next day declared the bulletproof vest a groundbreaking success. But behind the scenes, Zeglin and Szczepanik knew this was only part of the story. Not every demonstration had gone so smoothly. In one instance, a bullet struck an area of the vest where the silk weave had been imperfect. The result was a horrifying near miss for the volunteer, who suffered a bruised but unbroken rib. It became clear that even the slightest flaw in construction could mean the difference between life and death. Zeglin was haunted by these imperfections. He worked tirelessly to refine the design, but he knew that his silk armor would never be a perfect solution. The cost remained an insurmountable barrier for most people, and silk itself had its limits. Still, these early tests laid the groundwork for what would one day become a cornerstone of modern safety equipment. Despite the growing acclaim, Zeglin's bulletproof vest was about to face its most unexpected challenge. In 1902, King Alfonso III of Spain became the target of an assassination attempt. An anarchist fired a shot at the king as he rode through the streets, aiming directly for his chest. But Alfonso was wearing one of Szczepanik's silk vests, custom-made for royalty. The bullet struck the vest and stopped cold. The king's life was saved, and the silk armor was credited with preventing a national tragedy. This should have been a triumphant moment for Zeglin and Szczepanik. Their invention had proven its worth in the most high-stakes scenario imaginable. But instead of leading to widespread adoption, the event highlighted a glaring issue. The silk vest was simply too expensive for the masses. Each vest required so much material and labor that only the wealthiest individuals could afford it. The twist didn't end there. As word of the vest spread, it drew the attention of the US military, which was intrigued but ultimately dismissed the design as impractical for mass production. Other inventors began experimenting with alternative materials, looking for cheaper, more effective solutions. Zeglin's invention, while groundbreaking, was quickly overshadowed by advances in synthetic fibers like nylon and later, Kevlar. And yet, the silk vest's legacy persisted. Those early tests, those moments of bravery and innovation, proved that the concept of body armor was not just possible but essential. Zeglin and Szczepanik's work planted the seeds for what would become an industry dedicated to saving lives. But here's the shocking truth. Despite their revolutionary achievements, both inventors faded into relative obscurity. Their names were largely forgotten, their contributions overshadowed by later developments. Casimir Zeglin spent his later years in Chicago struggling to make ends meet, while Szczepanik returned to Europe, continuing his inventive work in other fields. The true impact of their invention wouldn't be fully realized until decades later, when advancements in material science brought bulletproof vests into everyday use. And yet, every modern vest owes its existence to those daring first tests, and to the men and women who stood in front of loaded guns, trusting their lives to an unproven idea. Their courage changed history. The story of the bulletproof vest doesn't end with those first daring tests. Instead, it echoes through time, shaping the way we protect ourselves and others in an increasingly dangerous world. What began as an experiment with silk has evolved into life-saving technology that has changed the course of countless lives. Today, bulletproof vests are made from advanced synthetic materials like Kevlar and Dyneema, capable of stopping high-velocity bullets and even protecting against sharp weapons. These vests are standard issue for law enforcement officers, military personnel, and security forces around the globe. They're also becoming more accessible to civilians, teachers, paramedics, and everyday people living in areas plagued by violence. The vest, once a luxury item, has become a necessity in a world where bullets are all too common. In America alone, tens of thousands of lives have been saved thanks to bulletproof vests. Police officers survive ambushes. Soldiers return home from the battlefield. Even children are protected in classrooms, their parents finding some comfort in a garment that shields them from harm. Each of these lives carries a direct connection to the first test, to the bravery of those early volunteers who risked their lives to prove an idea could work. But the need for protection has never been more urgent. In the United States, gun violence continues to claim lives at an alarming rate. Over 100,000 people are shot each year, with more than 40,000 dying from gun-related injuries. It's a sobering statistic, one that underscores the critical importance of the technology that protects against bullets. Yet even as the threat grows, so does the hope that technology can keep pace. The evolution of the bulletproof vest hasn't stopped. Researchers are constantly looking for ways to make body armor lighter, stronger, and more affordable. The same spirit of innovation that drove Kazimierz Zeitlin and Jan Szczepanik to experiment with silk still drives inventors today. New materials like graphene and liquid armor are being developed, promising to offer even greater protection in the future. But while the materials have advanced, the essence of the vest remains the same, a shield between a person and danger, a chance at survival when faced with the unthinkable. Every time a bulletproof vest stops a bullet, it is a testament to the courage of those first test subjects, to the inventors who dared to believe that something as simple as silk could save a life. Imagine the fear of standing in front of a loaded gun, trusting an untested invention to protect you. Imagine the courage it took for those volunteers to step forward, knowing the risk, but believing in the vision. Their bravery didn't just prove a concept, it laid the foundation for a legacy that continues to save lives today. When a police officer survives a gunfight, when a soldier comes home from the battlefield, or when a child is shielded from a stray bullet, it's not just the modern materials or engineering that made it possible. It's the history behind it, the bold experiments, the daring volunteers, and the inventors who refused to give up, even when the odds were stacked against them. Today, we live in a world where bullets still take too many lives, but we also live in a world where innovation and bravery have made it possible to fight back, to survive, and to protect the people we care about. The story of the bulletproof vest isn't just about the past. It's about the present and the future. Every modern vest carries with it a piece of that history. The silk weavers, the inventors, and the volunteers who stood in front of loaded guns to prove it could work. Their courage echoes in every life saved, in every person who gets another chance, because a bullet didn't find its mark. And so, the bulletproof vest stands as more than just a piece of equipment. It's a symbol of resilience, of the belief that even in the face of unimaginable danger, we can find a way to survive. It's a reminder that every life saved today owes something to the risks taken so long ago. It's a story of innovation, bravery, and the enduring fight to protect what matters most. So next time you see a bulletproof vest, remember its origins and the lives that made it possible. What would you have done if asked to stand in front of that gun? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video for more stories that changed history.